Quest to Succeed. Chapter 8. There had been a move for financial empowerment of the poor villagers, an expansion of small-scale industries in villages. Women empowerment also became a policy of the Indian government. Housing improvement had been a policy of the Indian central government. It had provided 2-bedroom houses with open courtyards, trees, and a garden to poor people. They used to live in huts, but now they could reside in brick houses with ventilation, water supply, and electricity. There were only 2 or 3 shops in his village, though hawkers used to come to sell vegetables every day. Once or twice a year, a utensil seller and cloth sellers and ladies' bangle sellers brought their goods to his village. The Indian villages had their own characters and characteristics. Villages were distanced from each other by about 1 mile. In other words, the villages were only about 1 mile apart. The farmers could reach their farms, work there, and return home in the evening. Their family members could bring food and water for them. These villages were mostly self-sufficient for basic needs. In the early 1950s, Jay's village was not big enough to have its own panchayat, village council. His villages joined hands with a nearby village to elect a panchayat. The panchayat had panch councillors from both the villages. They used to hold meetings to consider the problems of their villages. The panchayat's functions included cleanliness and water well maintenance. There was no office for the panchayat. The meetings were held at a chaupal, community building in villages in North India. Within a decade, however, the population in both the villages increased to the level required for a separate panchayat. Jay's village had its own council from the 1960s. There were 4 tehsils, treasuries, in his district. The farmers paid their land tax at the treasury. The village panchayat could collect a small amount of house tax. In his village, however, this tax was not regularly collected. The village council received a grant from the district council to maintain wells. The roads and footpaths were not properly maintained in the 1950s. His village, nevertheless, had a tube well which used electricity to draw water for the farms. It was outside the village. Children used to go for a bath in the pond of the tube well from where the water flow started to the farms. There was no electricity in the village, either in public places or in houses. In the summer, people used to sit under trees to get cool air. In the winter time, they used to sit in the sunshine on the roof terrace or in the open yard of their houses. The village communities had their own baitak, lounge, drawing room, or living room. The male members used to relax and get together there. Women lived and stayed inside the house. They used the outer room as a lounge and received their guests in their living room. The farmers kept their animals, cows, buffaloes, oxen close to their houses, but in places surrounded by walls. It had 1 room for fodder and a machine to cut fodder. The machine was propelled by 2 men, and the fodder was fed into the system by a 3rd person. His village had a patwari, revenue officer. He kept records of the ownership of land and its use, like cultivable and uncultivable land or wetland, whether the land was used to grow fruits, flowers or vegetables or other crops, wheat, barley, millet, peas, chickpeas, and sugar cane. The patwari also kept records of the grounds used for temples, altars, cremation grounds, rest houses, where food and water were served. When a piece of land was sold to another person, the patwari would record it in his register and inform the transfer of ownership at the tehsil, finance department which collected taxes. It was also known as the treasury. In Jay's village, the patwari was an elderly gentleman. He used his living room as an office. He did not have a desk or a table, but he had an iron chair. He used to sit and work on his bed, khat, which was his main furniture. He kept his files and register in cloth bags. Sometimes an official from the tehsil would come to visit the village and check the patwari's register. The patwari, revenue officer, was entrusted with the task of retaining a census register for tax payment and non-tax paying households, the number of inhabitants in each household, their professions and castes, incomes and expenditure. He also kept details about the villagers' cattle, their property, and agricultural production. The taxes were paid only by those who could afford. The level of taxation depended on the family income and expenditure. In times of difficulty and crop failure, the taxes were exempted. There was no income tax on agricultural production. There was another part-time government employee called Chowkidar, gatekeeper or security guard, who kept a register of births and deaths. He was uneducated, but he used to ask others to enter the names of the newborn in his register. Jay entered names of new births many times in his register. The Chowkidar, gatekeeper or security guard, used to take this register to the police station. The police station was about 3 miles from his village. They used to collect data for their area and take it to the district headquarters. The information was filtered into the state and national system. It gave the right picture of the population of the state and the country. There were a couple of tailors in the village and a few barbers who used to go to their customers' houses to cut hair. The villages did not have any barber shops. Watermen and waterwomen supplied water in kalash metal pot from wells to villagers' homes every day. These metal kalash pots were purchased from towns or from the utensil sellers who used to come to the village 2 or 3 times a year. All villages did not have water pipelines, but a few people did have pipes connected to their homes in the early years of the 21st century. Jay's village did not have a potter. A potter from another village supplied clay pots. He used to come to the village every week. Sometimes the villagers would go to the potter's village to acquire pots or order several pots, which were later delivered by the potter himself. He used to bring pots either in a small cart or on donkeys. He supplied all kinds of clay pots and clay cups at weddings. This system had existed for thousands of years. The Manusmriti, Memoirs of King Manu, stressed that the villages should be self-sufficient republics, which should produce their own food, weave their own cloth, and make their own pottery. The surplus goods should be sold to towns. In ancient times, the villages were richer than the towns. Apart from agriculture, craft-centered cottage industries flourished in villages. The unity and progress of villages was accorded through district headquarters, which administered about 1,000 villages. The district officials were to maintain peace in villages and help their residents in times of difficulty and crop failure, which could have taken place due to lack of rain or heavy monsoon or drought. The same system continued throughout the Mauryan period and until the 16th century.